Welcome to Life Stories, where we share powerful and inspiring journeys that remind us of the strength of the human spirit. Today's story follows Michael Harris, a man born into privilege who defied expectations and chose love and authenticity over wealth and status. His decision to marry Ava, a woman from a humble background, set him on a path of rejection, hardship, and ultimately, success. Join us as we explore the profound lessons learned from love, resilience, and the courage to build a life that truly matters. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel to start today's story. It all started in the way that most great stories do, with a decision. A single choice that would forever change the course of a life. Michael Harris had been the golden boy, the heir to a real estate empire, raised in the comfort of wealth and privilege. His future already mapped out long before he could understand the world around him. His father, Gregory Harris, had built a legacy that spanned decades. Their family name was synonymous with power, influence, and success in the real estate industry. His mother, Eleanor, was the perfect counterpart, poised, elegant, and utterly dedicated to maintaining their high status in society. Their expectations for Michael were clear from the start. Attend the best schools, obtain an Ivy League degree, and one day, take over the reins of the family business. As he grew up, Michael did everything that was expected of him. He excelled in school, attended all the right events, and maintained the image of the perfect son. He walked the paths set before him, never questioning the road he was on. It was easier that way. His world was structured, orderly, and predictable. He didn't have to think too much about it. He wasn't rebelling, not at first. He simply followed, trusting that this was the way things were meant to be. That is, until he met her. Her name was Ava. She was unlike anyone Michael had ever met. She wasn't trying to fit into the world that he had grown up in. Ava had no concern for status or the expectations that ruled his life. She didn't come from a wealthy family, nor did she aspire to one. She was an artist, living in a modest apartment in the heart of the city. When Michael met her, he was attending an art exhibition, an event he'd agreed to go to out of obligation. It was hosted by one of his father's associates, and Michael had assumed it would be like any other, a gathering of people more interested in showing off their wealth than appreciating the art. But then there was Ava. She stood in front of a simple painting that no one else seemed to notice. While the other guests chatted mindlessly about the more expensive pieces, Ava was engaged, her eyes alight with passion as she spoke about the painting's deeper meaning. Michael, always accustomed to people wearing masks of politeness and calculating every word, found her refreshing. She wasn't pretending. She wasn't playing a part. She was just herself, free, authentic, and captivating. The first conversation they had was unlike any he had ever experienced. Michael introduced himself, expecting her to recognize his name and treat him accordingly. But she didn't. She treated him like just another person, a stranger. For the first time in his life, Michael didn't feel the weight of expectations. He didn't feel like he had to live up to anything or anyone. There was no pressure. It was just him and her, talking about things that mattered, not about the things that others deemed important. They spoke for hours that night. In the weeks that followed, they saw each other whenever they could. With Ava, Michael felt something he had never felt before: freedom. He could be himself, without judgment. He could say what was on his mind without worrying about how it would be perceived. Ava challenged him in ways that no one ever had. She forced him to see the world beyond the well-curated existence he had always known. He started to question everything: his family, his friends, the world he had grown up in. For the first time in his life, he felt as though he was seeing things clearly. But with that clarity came a painful realization. Michael knew that his family would never approve of Ava. She was everything they had hoped he would avoid. She was not from the right circles, didn't have the right background, and certainly didn't fit into the carefully planned life they had envisioned for him. But when Michael told them he was serious about Ava, that he wanted to marry her, the response was swift and brutal. His father, Gregory, didn't speak for what felt like hours after Michael made the announcement. He sat in his office, the air between them thick with the weight of unspoken words. When he finally spoke, his voice was cold, controlled. "You're making a mistake, Michael," he said, as though discussing a bad investment. "This isn't the life you were meant for." Eleanor, his mother, was less composed. "You can't be serious," she said, her voice high with disbelief. This is a joke, right? You can't possibly think that this is an acceptable match." They didn't ask if he was happy. They didn't care about the person Ava was. All they saw was someone who didn't fit into the mold they had carefully crafted for him. They spoke of legacy, reputation, and family duty, but none of their arguments reached him. Michael's mind was made up. He had seen a world outside of theirs. A world where love and authenticity were more important than power and status. And he wasn't willing to give that up. He wasn't going to live a life dictated by other people's expectations. His friends, too, found his decision laughable. They mocked him, treating it like some phase he would soon outgrow. "Come on, Mike. Really?" one of them had said. "You married her? How long do you think this will last? You know you're going to regret this, right?" They didn't understand. In their world, love was secondary to wealth and power. And to them, Michael's choice was nothing more than a ridiculous experiment. But Michael wasn't seeking their approval. For the first time in his life, he was making a choice that was entirely his own. His family could disown him. His friends could mock him. But none of it mattered. The only thing that mattered was that he was choosing to marry Ava, and that decision felt right. Deep in his heart, the wedding was everything Michael had imagined it would be, and nothing like he had expected. It was a small affair, modest yet intimate, a world away from the grand, ostentatious event his parents would have planned for him. Ava had wanted something simple, something real, and that's exactly what they had. The ceremony was held in a cozy venue that was far from the lavish settings his family would have preferred. The air was thick with tension. Yet despite the weight of the disapproval that hung in the room, there was an undeniable warmth in the air. Ava was radiant as she walked toward him. Michael couldn't take his eyes off her. For the first time in his life, he felt completely at peace. It didn't matter that most of his family wasn't there. It didn't matter that his mother had arrived, sat stiffly at the back, her face a mask of neutrality, or that his father wasn't even in attendance. He had made his choice. And in that moment, with Ava standing by his side, he knew he was exactly where he was meant to be. The vows they exchanged were short but heartfelt. And the kiss that sealed their union felt like the beginning of something far more important than anything his family could ever offer him. Yet, even as they left the ceremony, the whispers never stopped. The judgment didn't fade. Michael could feel it. He could feel the disapproving eyes on him as they made their way to the reception. But it no longer mattered. The reception was a quiet affair. Ava's family was there in full support, celebrating the new union with warmth and joy. Michael's side of the room was different. A few distant relatives had shown up, but their discomfort was palpable. They avoided eye contact, fidgeting in their seats as though they were bearing witness to something they couldn't quite comprehend. Michael's friends, the ones who had once shared countless good times with him, had shown up under the guise of support. But their words were laced with thinly veiled mockery, and their smiles were strained. "So, this is it, huh?" one of them had said, approaching Michael with a smirk. "You really went through with it? Well, good luck, mate. You're going to need it." It hurt, but Michael didn't let it show. He had made his decision. This was his life, and he wasn't going to let anyone's mockery take away from it. The night went on, the divide in the room more apparent than ever. Ava sat by his side, unwavering. She had always known that their journey together would be difficult, but she was ready to face it head-on. She never once doubted him. After the guests had left, Michael and Ava sat together in their tiny apartment, a place they had moved into after the wedding. It was nothing like the lavish lifestyle he had known, but it was theirs, and that made all the difference. Ava was already sketching in her notebook, the quiet hum of the city outside their window serving as the soundtrack to their new life. She never complained, never once made him feel bad about the sacrifices they were making. Michael, on the other hand, found it harder to adjust. The reality of their situation began to hit him harder than he had anticipated. His parents had cut him off entirely. His father had removed him from every account. Every investment tied to their name. His credit cards were frozen. And the apartment he had lived in, which was paid for by his family, was no longer available. He had been thrust into a world where he had to fend for himself. Ava offered to dip into her savings. But Michael refused. He had never realized how much he had relied on his family's wealth and support until it was gone. They moved to a smaller apartment in a different neighborhood. It was a far cry from the luxury he had known. But Ava made it feel like home. She filled the space with her laughter, her energy, and the quiet determination that had always been a part of her. They struggled. There was no denying that. Finding work was difficult. And Michael's degree, his family's connections, all seemed irrelevant now. He wasn't Gregory Harris' son anymore. He was just Michael, trying to make his way in a world that didn't care about his last name. He took whatever jobs he could find. Temp work, short-term contracts, just to keep them afloat. But there was something in the way Ava held him at the end of each long day. Something in the way she always smiled, even when they had little left. That kept him going. Her optimism, her belief in their future, was something he clung to. Every rejection, every obstacle they faced, was just another test. And together, they were determined to prove that they could make it. Without anyone's approval, without anyone's help but their own. Still, as the days wore on, Michael couldn't escape the whispers. He overheard people in cafes, strangers on the street, gossiping about him, the rich man's son who threw it all away. They didn't understand. They couldn't understand. But that didn't stop it from hurting. It didn't stop the weight from settling deeper into his chest. Months passed, and despite the ongoing challenges, Michael and Ava kept moving forward, determined to make their dreams a reality. They had built their new life together with little more than grit, passion, and a shared vision. They started small, using the last of their savings to launch a company they called Greenspace Designs, an eco-friendly design firm that aimed to make a difference in the world. The idea had been simple: create sustainable, aesthetically pleasing spaces that not only looked beautiful but were environmentally responsible as well. At first, it felt like they were swimming against an impossible current. The business world, especially in the design industry, was full of rejection. No one cared that Michael had once been the heir to a real estate empire. No one cared about his family name. The connections he had were gone. As was the prestige. He was just another entrepreneur, trying to make it in a crowded and competitive market. But that didn't deter them. With every rejection, they grew stronger. They pitched to anyone who would listen, sent out dozens of emails, and made countless cold calls. More often than not, they were met with silence or polite rejections. But every now and then, there was a spark, a door that opened just enough for them to step through. Their first break came unexpectedly. Through a mutual acquaintance, they were introduced to the owner of a small, eco-conscious cafe in the city. The cafe was looking to redesign its interior, and Michael and Ava saw an opportunity. Ava poured her heart into the designs, selecting sustainable materials and creating a space that was as functional as it was beautiful. Michael handled the business side, negotiating terms and making sure they could deliver on their promises without stretching themselves too thin. When they presented their ideas to the cafe owner, Ava spoke with quiet confidence. She explained how every material they used was carefully chosen to minimize waste, reduce energy consumption, and improve the overall sustainability of the space. Michael, on the other hand, handled the logistics, assuring the owner that they could meet the budget and the timeline. By the end of the meeting, they had secured their first client. It wasn't a massive deal, but it was something. It was proof that they could do this, that they could build a business that stood for something. They worked tirelessly on the project, often staying up late into the night to get every detail right. When the cafe finally reopened, the response was overwhelming. Customers loved the new design, and word began to spread. Slowly but surely, more businesses reached out to Greenspace Designs. curious about the company that was making waves with their sustainable approach to design. As the business grew, so did Michael and Ava's confidence. They reinvested every dollar they earned into the company, refining their services, expanding their reach, and hiring their first employee, a young designer fresh out of school. Then came a second, and a third. Soon, they were no longer just two people in a cramped apartment trying to make ends meet. They were business owners, entrepreneurs with a reputation that was growing day by day. But success came with its own set of challenges. As Greenspace designs became more well-known, they began to attract the attention of larger clients. Companies that had once dismissed them now saw potential in what they were doing. But with that attention came scrutiny. Michael could still feel the shadow of his family's name looming over him. Despite the hard work they had put in, there were still whispers. Some clients questioned whether he could really stand on his own, wondering if his family's influence had played a role in their success. Yet, Michael refused to engage with those doubts. He and Ava had built this company on their own, and that was all that mattered. Slowly but surely, the world began to see them for who they were, not the child of a mogul or the beneficiary of a family legacy, but two individuals who had created something meaningful from the ground up. Their designs weren't just about aesthetics. They were about sustainability, about leaving a positive impact on the world. And that, in the end, was more important than any name or legacy. They had fought for their place in the world. And now, they were finally starting to earn the respect they deserved. As Michael and Ava stood at the threshold of a new chapter in their lives, they knew the journey wasn't over. Every step they had taken, every sacrifice, every challenge, had led them to this moment. Their company, Greenspace Designs, had not only become a successful venture but also a symbol of everything they had fought for: authenticity, love, and the courage to build something meaningful from the ground up. Looking out over the city skyline, Michael realized that the whispers, the doubts, the judgment from his past had faded into the background. What mattered now was the life they had created together. Ava's unwavering support, her boundless optimism, had carried him through the toughest moments. Together, they had faced rejection, hardship, and uncertainty, but they had never wavered in their belief in each other and their shared vision. Now, as they continued to grow their business, they found themselves at the center of something far bigger than just success or recognition. They were part of a movement, one that valued sustainability, creativity, and impact. And as their name began to carry weight in the industry, it was no longer the legacy of Michael's family that defined him, but his own achievements. This was just the beginning. There would be more challenges ahead. But Michael and Ava were ready. They had faced the hardest battles and had emerged stronger, more united than ever. Together, they would continue to break down barriers, build lasting change, and prove that true success isn't measured by wealth or legacy, but by the difference you make in the world. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to subscribe to our channel for more inspiring life stories. Stay tuned for more.